Hi everyone, I'm Michael Cooper, CEO of CCS Interactive, and I have some thoughts to share with you about our recent incident on Monday with Amazon. I thought my Monday was bad, but I'm sure somebody at Amazon's was much, much worse. And it's hard to know exactly what to take away from this. We live in a world of modern conveniences, and cloud computing is one of those, cloud infrastructure. In the old days when we had servers on site, you would be terrified that things like this would happen to you, and you'd take down services that maybe you're offering to your clients. And the benefit of cloud infrastructure is that you feel like it's super solid and super dependable, and it's out there, and it's a set it and forget it situation. And then you have a day like Monday where one simple little thing can take down major players. So over here, we had a number of systems that we use on a regular basis go down for the entire day. Things like GoDaddy, Adobe, Figma. Those of us that have to get our Duolingo streak going were deeply affected as well. And it can be a major setback. And in some ways, it's a relief that it wasn't our fault. But on the other hand, we're trying to do the best we can for our clients or avail ourselves of the services that we need to do our work. And it can be very disruptive when something like this happens. As more information came out about it, it turns out that it was a DNS issue. I certainly can relate to the terror of a DNS problem. I've done a lot of work over the last year to build out my team and delegate and hand off more and more responsibility, but DNS is something that I still hold very close to my chest because I know that if something goes wrong, it can be catastrophic. And that's exactly what happened there for Amazon. Some small little thing that basically obfuscated how to get to a special service that they use, DynamoDB, broke down, and all of the services that used DynamoDB couldn't connect to it. And the problem with DNS is that when changes happen, there's something called time to live on them. The idea is DNS is like an address book, an online address book. It says if you put in a web address, the computer goes up and looks up that web address and gets back an IP address that tells it where to go. And this can be a relatively intensive or time-consuming process in the computer world. We're talking milliseconds here, but it can add up. And so computers are generally set up to store that information. Once they look it up once, they don't want to have to look it up again for a long period of time. And so what likely happened here is that one little DNS problem, a bunch of servers cached that problem. And then when they made efforts to correct it, a lot of those servers weren't picking up that change right away. So even though they had resolved the issue supposedly early in the morning, a lot of the services that were depending on it didn't pick up those changes immediately. And ergo, the rest of the internet is down for quite some time. Again, we live in this modern world of convenience where cloud infrastructure is really important. It's the backbone in so many things that we do, but it does underscore the danger that many institutions relying on one service, and if it goes down, it can take a lot of things down. This was a mistake, but what if it had been an attack type of situation? So I think it's a little sobering to think about whether or not our systems are all hardened to something like this, whether or not we have adequate backup systems in place, whether or not we need to maybe reconsider the way we depend on particular companies and exclusively particular companies for the underlying systems that we use. So I can't really say what my conclusion is or what my response to this will be. I'm very fortunate that we do run a lot of systems on AWS, and thankfully our particular types of services were not affected by this, so none of my clients were directly affected by it. But it does make me wonder if I need to be really concerned about something like this happening again, especially since there's apparently a history of this particular location in Virginia having problems. It hasn't had a problem specifically like this before, and I think it's important not to overreact, but I think it's beneficial that now the larger internet community is having a conversation about what do we do when things like this happen to make sure that it's not any more disruptive than it already was. I suppose if I was running a really significant ad campaign, the optics of the endpoint of that campaign being down would be so bad that I would want to pause the campaigns. But when it's a large situation like what happened with AWS, I feel like people would be a little bit more understanding. I guess if hours go by and I don't have new information, it would probably make sense to go ahead and have another, hey, we're still working on this, we don't know yet. And it could even be one of those situations where there might be another reason why it's down, but you've got a little bit of cover because everybody's thinking, oh, it must be because of AWS. I will say that over here, we're very concerned about our servers having issues. And so we have monitoring systems going on that are periodically checking a website to see if it's up, and we get notifications if something is down. So if something like this had happened, or I should say, if we had been affected by this particular outage, I would have received notifications in the middle of the night about it. And I don't suppose there's much I personally could have done, but at least I would have been aware of the situation. I could have made my clients aware. I could have tried to steer things around to bypass the issues. So I think it's really important to have those systems in place. it's easy to become complacent and think, AWS, I mean, they're never going to go down. They have their own backup systems. Clearly, everything's going to be fine, and I don't even need to worry about it. But it is one of those things that you might want to double back and cross the T's, dot the I's kind of thing to make sure that there aren't any opportunities to improve your backup systems to make sure that you're not affected. But as far as how I would have behaved had one of my systems gone down, I think really just keeping the lines of communication open with your clients and making sure that you have monitoring systems in place so that you're the first to know if there is a problem. It's just about the most you can do. Unless you had a switch you could flip that would have diverted, let's say that this issue had taken down EC2, which is where a lot of server infrastructure is stored instead of just like a remote database system, which is what DynamoDB is. If you have a quick way to shift gears and spin up a server somewhere else and move everything over and get everybody's websites back up, that would be something that we could do. And I think in response to this, I'm actively thinking about making sure that I have that sort of a backup plan in place. I would say by and large, you should automate. The problem is you're most likely going to set up redundancy within the same ecosystem. So for example, if I have a server set up, a cloud server set up, I might use some of Amazon's services to have replication within Amazon. And I might even be able to go into different regions. And so like I have one server that's on the West Coast and then a cloned server that's over there on the East Coast and maybe one that's overseas or something if I'm being really extravagant about it, if we've got a really important system that we need that level of redundancy. But the problem is, what if the issue affects the entirety of Amazon? So now we might actually want to think about, okay, maybe I should have a backup plan, a redundancy over there in Azure or cloud, Google Cloud, so that if these being the major cloud service providers, especially for server infrastructure, then if something goes wrong with one, I can port over to the other. But unfortunately, it's really just not that simple. There are ways we could set up some sort of redundancy there, but it's certainly going to make web hosting a lot more expensive. If I'm maintaining 3 different services, or at least 2, to have a backup plan in place, then that really raises the cost of hosting to my clients. So there are things to consider. I suppose I would want to survey my clients a bit more about this, but my general feeling is they would be rather understanding if the larger internet was down or a huge chunk of it. Their clients, their customers in turn, would probably be pretty understanding if their website was down during something like that. So it might not be worth doubling or tripling the cost of hosting services to have some sort of redundancy. I think there probably are some things we could do on an automatic basis, and there are some things where maybe we would want to be able to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty doing it ourselves. But I do think it is important to have a backup plan. Redundancy and backup plan both, and they might have a fair amount of overlap. One thing though, if you're having servers, chances are you're taking significant backups. So if you do have backups, there's a decent chance that if you feel a problem is going to be ongoing long enough, you could take that backup and spin it up somewhere else where there isn't a problem. A dead giveaway of a problem is going to be whether or not it's isolated to my particular IP address. So first step for me is always going to be to go directly to the site myself on as many different devices as I can, and in particular using mobile devices that aren't on the same Wi-Fi network. If I use my cell phone to check in addition to my computer, then I know if there's a problem on both, then I know there's definitely not something with my network. A lot of times I'll VPN into some of my other networks that I have set up, again with different IP addresses. So first step for me is always going to be to check in as many different places as I can, and then reach out to other people I know and ask them to check from their networks. If the problem exists in one place and not others, then you know there might be something a little bit more device or network oriented. As I mentioned, I have down detectors in place, robots that are going and visiting certain websites that I've set up, and they'll let me know if they can't reach them. So I know if I'm getting signals from that, we have a larger issue. And then if I do see something that is seriously down, that's when I'll start to go out and look for larger services. Isitdown.com, I think, is one of them. Or I usually just Google, is it down? I'll look Facebook, is it down, or whatever. And you'll see pretty quickly, there'll be either the websites that'll be reporting it, or you'll see messages on Twitter, Reddit, or something like that, people mentioning it. So you just start doing your due diligence and looking through and seeing if there might be a larger outage, especially if it has to do with a system that, like the one that went down at AWS, that so many people depend on. Then it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly if it's a larger issue. I think you have to balance a little bit. You don't want to freak anyone out, especially considering that your clients probably don't have as much access to the lingo and whatnot. And so receiving a message saying, oh my God, the internet is down, might cause a little bit of a freak out. So usually it's just, this is happening, we're monitoring it, here's the information that we do have, we're going to keep you updated. And then I try to push out updates as often as I have new information. Or I guess if hours go by and I don't have new information, it would probably make sense to go ahead and have another check in and say, hey, we're still working on this, we don't know yet. I think you just have to use your judgment call. And you're also, of course, balancing this with actually doing the work. So let's say it's an issue that I actually have to work to resolve in some way. Then hopefully I have members of my team that can stay in touch, because I'm going to be laser focused on whatever the solutions are or whatever the research is, at least, that I need to be doing. I think it's important to keep in touch. Whether or not, I certainly wouldn't reach out to their clients, but I would reach out to my clients and let them figure out how they want to handle their information, whether or not they want to post to their socials to let people know that an outage is happening. I think it really is a case-by-case basis kind of situation. I'm not aware of any specific requirement to do. I think in certain cases it would be good practice, especially if you're offering a service that other people depend on. So say, for example, Figma. That's one of the services that we use for prototyping and designing websites and other things. And that service went down. That being said, I don't recall receiving an email from them saying, hey, this is happening and we're working on it. I do think I received like some push notifications from some apps that were affected, but by and large, it was left to me to discover that services were down. And again, I was very understanding. I'm not mad at GoDaddy or mad at Adobe. I knew pretty quickly once members of the team were saying, hey, we can't sign in, that it was likely all related to the same thing, and given them a good amount of grace. I suppose part of that is because I've had situations that I've had to resolve, and I know how frustrating and how deeply we feel badly about those kinds of situations happening, even if we're not at fault, but it's just we have this need, this obligation to serve our clients and our customers, and so we hold that very close to our own hearts. So for that same reason, I'm not even mad at AWS. Things happen. Should they have systems in place to make sure something like this doesn't happen again? Will they learn from this? I certainly hope so. Bad things happen. At the end of the day, we got everything back up, and it's been a conversation starter. We've got to look at the glass half full.